This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results. Are you ready to feel the power?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. I am not flying solo, but I also don't have the beard with me today. He's out on the road making money so that I can sit here and record podcasts. I've got a better replacement, Mr. Brad Boldt from Ameriguard Insurance in the great state of Minnesota. He has to deal with Troy Thompson. We won't hold that against him. And actually, I don't know if you know Dawn Bartley or not, but she's getting ready to walk into my office in about 2 minutes. So
wow,
she's down here visiting with her daughter and wanted to come by. So she's actually crashing at our house tonight too. So pray for her. She has no idea what she's walking into.
Yeah, she's actually on the podcast next week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
One of my favorite people in the industry too, man. Dawn is just so cool, so level-headed, has a really unique perspective on almost anything you talk to her about. So certainly looking forward to our time with visiting with her while she's in town. But that's not what we're talking about. Let's talk about what's going on with you, man. You launched a new podcast. Why don't you, let's just get right into it. Talk about your background a little bit. Before we get into the podcast, bring us up to speed. I'm not going to steal Scott Howell's DeLorean remarks or anything like that, but just sort of give us the background and sort of how you got into the agency business. And then if you want, just lead right into what led you to be motivated enough to start a podcast.
Yeah, I'll give a real quick background. I started as a farmer's agent, did that for nearly 9 years till I figured out I was miserable being a captive agent and knew that there would be a better way. I loved this business and discovered that I wanted to go independent. I tried to create my own independent agency, was having difficulty getting direct contracts. So I didn't know of networks or clusters at the time. So I looked for local agencies to join. I joined Ameriguard Agency. They were close. There was another farmer's agent that had joined there. I really liked the owner that I had met with. So I joined Ameriguard the end of 2006. Ended up buying out the company in 2011. So that started my agency ownership journey, and have just been learning and growing and failing ever since. So yeah,
it's funny, man. How long ago was that you went to try and leave when you left Farmers?
Yeah, 2006. Yeah.
Well, I was 10 years behind you, man. It was 2016 when I launched Florida Risk, and I still didn't know anything about aggregators. I had no clue they even existed. It was not until I got involved with IAOA and started actually meeting other agency principals and stuff that I knew that was even an option.
Yeah. I had no idea. I would have definitely went that route, and I probably would have made a mistake because I didn't know what I was doing. I would have just been excited to grab some markets. Right, was what we were looking for at the time. I could only get Progressive. AAA was what gave me a market, and I had one other that was considering. But I knew that if I was going to go independent, I needed a full arsenal. So I found something else for her.
So how did you get the opportunity to actually buy the agency out? There's got to be a story there.
Yeah, there's a story. I didn't know when I entered into the agency that our owner Ken had a terminal cancer.
Ooh.
He was given, at whatever time it was, he was given 4 to 6 years to live. And so I went independent. I was loving it. I was writing business, growing. I was happy. It was fun. And then I don't know, it was 18 months, 2 years after I was involved in the business, and I had heard from someone else in the agency that Ken had this terminal cancer and had about 3 years left from what he was given. And so not too long after that, I thought I had the capability to take over the agency, or at least was willing to do so. So I started talking to him about purchasing the agency. And I learned that he had no succession plan at all. So I have no idea what would have happened to us if I hadn't have purchased it. So I started working with, I said, hey, why don't we at least just he loved the idea. He really liked me. And for the most part, he really cared about his people, and he wanted to make sure that his people were taken care of. And I said, I can do that. Mostly, I just wanted to keep my job, and I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, and felt confident enough that I could take over this and improve this operation. So I started working with his daughter, who is a high-ranking corporate attorney, really, really sharp, and to put a purchase agreement together. In the process of putting a purchase agreement together, Ken passed away, which made it even more difficult then to kind of put the final touches on purchasing the agency. Throw into it Ken's daughter, who they were very, very close, and throw into it the emotion of the passing, and trying to get rid of this large asset, and what do we do with it? So that little did I know, that was my first acquisition, and it was a trying one. Basically buying out the business, and we struggled our way through. And at the time, we had no idea how to put a valuation together on an insurance agency. We couldn't. We tried some banks, figured out they had no idea. We tried some other local agencies, got somewhat of an idea. She was way high. I thought, I knew there was some problems in the agency, so I had, kind of a set amount in mind. Here's where I'm going, and we got the job done, and it was a sale that I think we each thought that we got sort of a raw deal, so it was probably a pretty good deal. So that's how that's a kind of 10,000 foot view of that purchase.
Well, and then I see you had Carrie Wallace on your podcast recently. If only you had known her then.
Right. If I had known her then, my agency would be in a much better place than it is now. I can tell you that.
But look, man, we can all say that too, right?
Yeah.
I'm going through this issue right now at our agency where I'm going to have to spend a bunch of money to do it. But I've hired Peggy Corbett from Agency Transform to come in and just go freaking ballistic on our Hawksoft, because we're so heavily sales centric that we live in our CRM, and our Hawksoft has never been a preferred tool. Like the producers don't want to deal with it. And so it's sort of become the redheaded stepchild. Now I am happy to know that when she went through and did the first deep dive to look at things, it wasn't as bad, as what I thought it was going to be. I figured it was going to be much worse than what it was, just because you hear so many horror stories from people about how bad their data gets if it's not being paid attention to and everything. And so, we brought Peggy in to kind of just make sure everything's set up right, put the processes, just even things as simple as having files named in a consistent fashion across the board. Like, these are things I suck at, man.
Yeah.
I'm the last guy in the world that you want to have come in and do that job. Like, I just, even from a CSR or an account manager position, I'm terrible for training a CSR or account manager. I've never sat at the desk. What level of authority do I have to teach these people how to do a job I've never done before? And so she's going to be able to not only help us with the Hawksoft stuff, but she's able to help us with our, train our virtual professionals that we have from Savitel to do that. So like one of my goals, and I know that you have a VP from Savitel, we both know Troy, one of my things is at the end of this year, man, 100% of my service stuff, if it doesn't require somebody here to pick up the phone and call and deal with a client, it's going to Savatal. I don't care if I have 8, 10, 12 virtual professionals. So we're really at the ground level of us defining what the process is going to be. And then I'll just keep her on retainer. And every time I add a couple of VAs, she'll train them exactly the same way. And I hired I brought 2 people in at the 1st of February. And one of those young ladies is going to actually be what I would consider the leader of this initiative over in Pakistan, because I don't, if we have 10 virtual people, I can't deal with 10 individual calls, man. It's just not going to happen. I need one call that I can have with somebody that's going to be able to drive whatever needs to be driven over there. And then I can hold them accountable. They can hold everybody else accountable. I will compensate her at a different level as a result of that. But, I've talked to probably a half dozen people, and every single one of them has sung Peggy's praises. She only does Hawksoft. She doesn't do any other agency management system, but the people in Paradiso, Chris Paradiso is one of the people who recommended her to me. He and I are really good friends, and he was in the same spot that I was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And he brought her in, and he told me that she just did absolute wonders for his agency. So I'm kind of I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm a little bit apprehensive because I don't know how bad it's going to end up being for me as far as workload, but it's where we're at, man, because I need to be at a point. And I was talking to Carrie Wallace, about it when I was with her a couple of weeks ago. And I told her, I said, I want a valuation in 24. I can't get there yet. I got to make sure all of this stuff's tightened up, and then I'm going to call you in. Then you can pick me apart, but I'm not going to make your job easy. If you came in today, you wouldn't even have to work.
So I had a valuation, and I knew it. I knew I had some things that weren't tightened up, but I just wanted to find out where I was at. And
is this after now this is you owning Ameriguard now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just went through it last year with Carrie.
Okay.
So kind of going back to when I owned, or when I took over as owner of Ameriguard, I would more so consider myself, I was a full-time agent that owned an insurance agency. I owned a business, but I wasn't a business owner.
It's the worst.
And so, which is kind of referencing the podcast, that's where that idea really came about, was that's something I have experience in, is being an agent, being an agency owner, but not being a business owner. So instead, until I really started to look at the agency as a business and run it like a business, I wasn't going anywhere.
Well, it is this. Look, man, I'm 100% on board with you, and I'm driving the bus for that matter. I've done middle market commercial production since the day I walked into the industry. I'm good at it. I'm not saying that to be cocky or arrogant, but that's my skill set. I pride myself on doing a really good job at that. When you go from that to now you're running an agency and you've never been responsible for the service team, you've never sat at the desk to understand what the workflow looks like, you're generally allergic to an agency management system as a producer, you want to stay out of it, and you're now all of a sudden, it's not even just you have to utilize these things, but you're responsible for them, and you're responsible for everything else that goes into it, and the lives of everybody else that's on the bus with you. That's a really humbling thing to go through, because, producers typically have pretty high self-confidence. We think we're good at what we do, and as a result, we tend to be perceived as maybe more flamboyant or more cocky or whatever else. That, I can tell you in my heart, that's not the case. It may be the way I'm perceived. I can't really do anything to control that other than try and get to know people. But, it's humbling, man, when you're like the guy that's driving the revenue and everybody's loving the fact you just closed another account for the agency and they're ringing the bell and celebrating. And the next thing you know, you're sitting in the dining room of your house figuring out, how do I get carrier contracts? Where am I going to get E&O? What, agency management system, screw that. We can run this thing off of Excel for the first 6 months. I'm not going to write enough business to have to worry about capturing any of that. That's a really wild place to be. And that's why I think your podcast is such a great topic, because there are a lot of producers out there. Listen, if you're an agency principal, you're probably getting ready to get pissed off at what I'm getting ready to say. But that's fine. At the end of the day, You have to take care of the producers that are in your operation, just like you have to take care of your entire staff. You don't need to show any preferential treatment, but this is the revenue for the agency. And I think a lot of the times, producers agency principals don't take the time to educate and explain and give the why, right? Yeah. I'm a huge believer in, if you're going to explain something to somebody, tell them, don't just tell them what, don't just tell them how, tell them why. When people understand why you need them to do something the way you're asking to do it, it's going to stick. They're going to buy in better. But what do we hear, man? Well, why, mommy? Because I said so. And that's why we run our agencies, right? It's because this is the way we've always done it. This, because I said so, instead of saying, well, the reason we've done this is because, and lay it out. Here's the problem. I don't think agency principals want to get feedback on that, because I hire the type of people, and I'm sure you do too, but I hire the type of people in my agency that if I tell them the why and it doesn't make sense and they think they have a better way, they're empowered to actually say something about it, right? Yeah. I want to hear what they have to say.
Yeah. I think for the most part, I think that happens to so many of us. Most of us started off as producers, and we're hyper focused on growth. That's what we're driven. Customer service isn't our specialty, but we want to grow. We want to win. We want to win that account. Before you know it, 5 years goes by and you have a team and you've just kind of limped along, and now you've got problems that you're trying to discover solutions for, instead of building a solid foundation from the beginning. And we don't know this when we're going into it. I didn't know it,
Sure.
And instead of building a solid foundation of having processes, of good hiring practices, of somewhat of a financial background. For me, I had my head down for 7 years as an agency owner, just trying to grow and just, answering some questions, here and there, and letting Sally do it her way over there in the customer service desk, and letting Katie do it do it how she wants to do the accounting practices. Before you know it, I have no processes. I have no written processes. I don't know what a P&L looks like, or how to read it. And, I didn't adapt from the changing times and the evolution of our industry, since 2011. So, I guess the podcast is centered around trying to help develop better business owners and thinking about that on the front end rather than, on the back end. I heard you say one time, this is many years ago, that I started this thing with the end in mind, which you must be in the 1% that thought of it that way, right?
No, you know what, man? I'm just one of those weird people. I always have thought backwards. I mean, in everything that I do, I think backwards, and I'll elaborate on that in a minute. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no, okay. But even with that, and you've just laid out, some of the deficiencies of, whether it's, management systems or whatever, it's hard to think of everything. And you don't know what areas you need to improve on. But sorry, go ahead and elaborate what you want to elaborate.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I always think that way, because to me, it's easier to reverse engineer things than it is to figure it out as you go, right? To your point, I think a lot of times, I was talking to my buddy Josh Gurley about this, yesterday. We were going back and forth because our wives both have very expensive shopping habits at this point. And we were kind of joking with each other about it. And and somehow the conversation came up. I don't know if it was in his in-laws or whatever, but he was talking about how frugally his in-laws or his parents, I don't remember which, live. They have enough money to buy whatever they want, but they still shop at TJ Maxx. They still, wear glasses with tape on them instead of going and buying new glasses or whatever. And I said, you know what, man? I said, that's why they have money to go do whatever they want. Right. And I told him, I said, the thing is, you and I are not wired that way. I said, I've always been of the mindset, screw it, I'll just sell my way out of it, right? I'll just go write another account, or I'll just go prospect harder. And if I've made a bad decision that's cost me money, that's always been the answer, is I could just go generate more revenue, because that's where my skill set is, instead of sitting back and taking a hard look in the mirror and say, okay, where's money going? Where are we missing efficiencies? What are things that I have control of in this operation that I can actually make an impact on? And I mean, even the thinking backwards thing is as simple as what we teach producers and how to plan their business, right? I want them to tell me, how much do you want to make this year? Just tell me what that is. As soon as we know what that number is, we can start from that and work all the way backwards using commission splits and conversion percentages in each of the stages in the pipeline. And ultimately, I'm going to tell you exactly how many emails you need to send, how many phone calls you need to make, how many doors you need to knock on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual basis. And it's going to get you to your goal. But so many times we just kind of just throw a number out there. I'm going to write 100,000 in revenue this year. Great. I don't care what you're going to do. I want to know how you're going to do it.
Right. Without a plan in place, obviously it's not going to happen.
100%, man. So what would you say? So you had the farmer's agency, so you had a leg up on me right out of the box.
Yeah, right.
You had that. But I mean, you go in, obviously under less than optimal circumstances for a variety of reasons. You find yourself owning this agency now, which is, I'm sure you wanted to. It's not like you begrudgingly bought it, but it probably, I mean, I can understand what a grueling process it would be with everything that you mentioned going through. Like, what hit you between the eyes first? Like, what was the biggest thing that you realized when you had that first, oh crap moment? I'm the agency owner. Here's a problem. But then also you had the power to fix it without really having to go and talk to anybody or get permission. I'm interested in what surprised you the most.
The first thing was that now I'm responsible. Now I'm responsible for the problems, and now I'm responsible for these employees. Like, these people, their livelihood in some cases depended on my business. And so that was something I took very seriously, and I've always taken it very seriously as being a leader. And, and that was the very first thing that hit me. In fact, the very first thing that I did, I had a producer there that was very careless, and the closing of the business went through on a Friday. I met with him Saturday morning to lay out, because I knew how careless he was. In fact, I was dealing with an E&O claim before I was even the owner, and it was by him, and it was just careless acts. So I met with him and said, we can't operate this way, and I won't be responsible for this. So it was, and I'll change. Well, I ended up firing him months later, about 4 months later. I actually learned that he was not only careless, he was criminal. So I got to deal with the Department of Commerce, which was, it was baptism by fire when I took over. I had 2 E&O claims, Department of Commerce investigation. We had a real hard market. Rates were going up like crazy. And it was that first year. I don't know how I got through it, but I do believe it made me stronger. So,
I can agree with that, man, for sure. If it doesn't kill you, it is going to make you stronger, but good grief. I mean, we get tested almost on a daily basis for those first few years.
Well, and it was a good lesson to say to the rest of our, producers, to say, this is how we're going to do it. In terms of documentation, and, that we're not going to tolerate any unethical behavior, and it has to be by the book, because I realized right away that my name is on the board. I'm responsible. And just fast forwarding a little bit, until I read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, man, that was an eye opener for me, that everything that happens in your business is your responsibility, is your fault. So
100%. After
I read that, I said, well, I better tighten up. So, it's been a journey. It is true. You learn something every day, and I am actively working to become a better owner, better leader, better business owner every day.
So what do you think the most rewarding thing's been for you to this point?
Seeing a team that's actually developed into a team, and to care about each other. And like, I think any other team, when you start to see, that they have, that they have personal lives, and that rolls over into their workplace. And so to see a team that supports each other and that is in some cases cried together, laughed together, and had fun, that's been special.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think that's, to me, probably, you get to a point where the adrenaline rush wears off, right? I mean, when you're a producer, it's really no different, in my opinion, than being a drug addict or a gambling addict or whatever else. You're going to go out and you're going to get whatever it takes to get your adrenaline pumped up, get that dopamine rush, whatever. And then it goes away and you go out and you do it again. And you find that you get less and less excited, and you move up to bigger accounts, and then it comes back, and then bigger accounts. At some point, we get to a point where I love it, but I don't get the same rush that I used to get. I actually get more excited when I can see a new producer go out and get a piece of business that they never would have been able to get, or even that they've taken something that I've taught them and morphed it and made it work to be able to go out and generate an opportunity and see that through from beginning to end. That is far more rewarding to me than anything that I can accomplish for myself personally at this point. I still like to produce. I still like to make money. I still like to close, but it's just not where my motivation is anymore. Yeah. And I think that, to me, when my mind and my heart are set on watching other people succeed and me assisting them in doing that, I'm far more effective, and the agency is going to be much healthier. There's been too much time where I have been the breadwinner for the agency, and I can't operate like that, right? That goes back to what you were saying. You end up being a producer who just happens to have your name on the outside of the building, as opposed to being a business owner. And there's no good leader out. I don't think that the person leading the team should always be the top salesperson. I don't think they should.
No. And I don't know if I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I've learned I can't do all things. I can't do all the things well that I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm still evolving into a business owner only. I still do some production. I probably do, I'm probably 75% agency owner, 25%,
I don't think I'll ever be 100, man. I'm with you. Like I can't completely abandon it, but I agree.
But I agree with you in I love training our people and setting down. I think that's something that and maybe that just comes with age a little bit too. I think that's something that I've improved on, to try and speak in their language, whether it's training or, producing, or even if it's just getting Google reviews. I started something last year of really trying to transition my team from just a service team to a sales aspect, and really started pushing that piece of it. And I started doing that by keeping score and kind of gamifying a little bit. And they've enjoyed it, and it's taken off. And a part of that was asking for reviews, and you see them getting excited about it. And we make a big deal that when they get a review or even a cross sell, that's a win. And our team kind of celebrates a little bit. So yeah, I enjoy that way more than if I sell a policy. I mean, we've done that. I still like doing that. You still want to win. You're still driven by that. That's how you're wired.
Yeah, but I mean, we owe it to the people who are on our teams to give them the best version of us. And sometimes that's not being the producer. Yeah.
To me, a friend of mine asked me one time, like, what's your goal? What's your goal for the agency? I think he was referring to a size amount or a premium amount. And really my answer is, and it's a bit vague, but I want to be great. Right now, I feel like I'm good. I think I'm pretty good, but I want to be great. Will I ever, I'm my own worst critic. Will I ever get there? I don't know. But, as Teresa Kitchens taught me, progress, not perfection. I think I'm striving for perfection. You'll never get there.
Right.
But I just might find excellence. I think it was, I don't know who said it. Might have been Vince Lombardi that said something of that similar. You strive for
James Cameron, actually, the guy that was the director of Titanic, said that if you if you set your goals high enough and miss them, you still achieve more than everybody else, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Lombardi had quotes like that too.
Yeah.
But that one from James Cameron is always stuck with me. And I'd say something similar to what you mentioned from Teresa. I always, and I 100% ripped this off from somebody. I have no recollection who it was. It was probably a famous quote, but I always say that imperfect action will always supersede perfect inaction 100% of the time. And we get, we're so worried about everything being absolutely perfect, exactly the way we want it to be before we even start. And you're really doing more damage than good. And, I see this a lot specifically with producers, especially because when I hire a producer, they're not from the insurance industry. So when I'm bringing people in that, like Kyle, who have sold office supplies or office equipment or technology products or whatever, and they don't know anything at all about insurance. I tell them it doesn't matter. Like we can teach you that. We can send you to get your CIC designation. You have plenty of people here who already have those designations that can make sure you don't screw anything up on the insurance. But, there's no such thing as being able to take a USB drive and stick it in your ear hole and download everything you need to know about this industry. I'm almost 20 years deep and I still learn something almost every single day, if not every day.
Yeah.
And so we allow ourselves to let all of this fester in our head, and what we really are doing is talking ourselves out of starting.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier, which was not your process, which is my process. Pretty much my process is get started and figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
I did that with the podcast. I did that with YouTube, and well, I don't think I've really improved a whole lot with YouTube, but I do it and I get some results, and you do figure it out as you go and you get comfortable with it. Agreed. It's the same thing with producing.
Yeah. I never really understood that because I've kind of been fearless to a certain degree, or maybe I was just dumb, but I never let what I didn't know stop me from at least going and trying to have the conversation and start it. And I do think, that I am resourceful enough that I can figure answers out along the way. I mean, I'm 100% the same way. What do they say? Ready, fire, aim. I mean, that's where I'm at. But I mean, I would rather be that way. And I think what it's taught me, Brad, is it's taught me how to identify where I need to double down and where I need to cut bait much quicker. So, I'll still make a bad mistake, but I won't live with the bad mistake.
Yeah.
The one place that I live with a bad mistake more than any other, and thankfully we're not dealing with any of this at this point, but I'm way too patient with a problem team member. Way too patient. So patient that I have to listen to my wife chirp at me at dinner every night when I'm dealing with something at work. We had a lady that was here like 2.5, 3 years ago, and it was the same thing over and over and over again. And I've always been in the mindset, by the time I have to terminate somebody, I'm really just letting them know this was their decision, not mine, because I've given them every opportunity to do the right thing. They know the rules. We've talked about the rules. Here are the 3 times I've written you up where you've acknowledged that you understand it. You're the one who made the decision not to follow procedure, right? So I don't have a choice. I can only assume you don't want to work here anymore. But, it takes me a really, really, really long time to get to that stage. And that's something I need to do better on. I wasn't good about that when I was earlier in my career. When I was 22 and I was ran my first store in the grocery industry, I was the nastiest SOB you would ever meet. And I would fire you if you looked at me wrong. And it was funny because one of my best friends on the planet is a dude that he was my co-manager for a while, but I had promoted him up through the ranks a little bit over time, and just extremely loyal to me, very good friend to this day. But he came down to visit, and he said, "What happened to you, man? When did you get soft?" And I think it's a different dynamic, man. When your name's on the building, when you own everything, when you own the wins as well as the mistakes that you make that you learn from. you look at it through a different lens, you know? And I don't know. I feel like if I'm bringing somebody in and I like that person so much that I'm willing to invest in them financially, you know, that to me, that's a big investment for me. That they're almost like family at that point, you know, when you have people, especially when you're not dealing with 100-person agency, you've got a relatively small nucleus to your team. You know, I would tell you that I'm probably, more than getting angry or irritated, I probably get my feelings hurt more than anything else when people don't perform or don't do what I want them to do, because I take that as personally a personal attack against me. And the other thing is, none of us want to lose, right? None of us want to admit we made a bad decision in hiring somebody or bringing people in.
Yeah.
And so there's probably a little bit of that plays into it too. But that's the one thing that I would say that I probably really need to tighten up more than anything else if we're really going to scale, because even though I'm being patient, you know, or have in the past have been patient, it really affects the culture of everybody else. And many times people aren't willing to come and tell you that because they don't want to turn on their teammate. But you have to know. I mean, you have to recognize those things as the leader of the operation.
Well, that's hard. That's to me, that's the hardest thing that we can do, is get rid of someone, even when it's warranted. You know, the people that I've gotten rid of, which have all been warranted, but it's difficult. It's by far the hardest thing to do. I won't get rid of people very quickly. But you know, I have put a performance plan in place. And if they don't meet that, I believe I give every opportunity I can before I terminate someone, because I take that very, very seriously. And I'm not afraid to admit that I made a mistake and move on. I dwell on it a little bit, and then I move on. Like I said, cut bait and live with it.
I think it's a different thing though when it's 6 weeks versus 6 years or something like that. You know?
6 years, that's a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's where it happens to me, because what ends up happening is I tolerate something that manifested itself early on, and then I try and course correct, but it ended up just letting it, I don't do a good enough job of fixing it then. And so that person exists. And then it's like, you've been here 2 years and you're still doing the same thing. It's a lot more difficult for me to have that conversation at that point.
You know, we always talk about building a culture, you know, building a team. Well, that's a fine line when you're someone that is going to take away their livelihood, that we have to be careful not to cross. So
yeah, it's interesting. So talk to me a little bit, man. I know that you're doing virtual professionals. I know you use Savitel like I do. What does that look like for you? And were you using virtual professionals before you engaged with Savitel? Or is this your first rodeo?
It's the first time using one. I looked at another organization before I started with Savitel. I was, you know, virtual assistants seemed like kind of a buzzword in our industry for a long time. I initially wanted nothing to do with it, and it's just something I thought I don't need. Well, as things changed and as we grew, and I looked at it as a good opportunity to get some unlicensed work off of our licensed people. So I explored this option, and I am pleasantly surprised at the value that I've been able to get out of having a virtual professional. We have her doing so many different things. I didn't think that she would be able to do, you know, that many different tasks. And I mean, we have her doing things that, you know, my licensed staff doesn't want to do. Mortgage verifications. She handles about a fourth of the initial phone intake. She does a lot of the policy endorsement changes. She handles all of our applications, sending them out for signature, putting them in the file, a lot of our data entry. I've had her, you mentioned Hawksoft earlier. We also use Hawksoft. And so we have in Hawksoft, we get amount of unmatched documents that are downloaded every day. And you mentioned Peggy Corbett. She was just turned on to me, or somebody said that that they don't have nearly as many as they did before now that Peggy Corbett got involved in them. But so unmatched documents it's a time consuming, it probably takes, I don't know, I don't do them, but it probably takes about an hour a day. She handles those, which is a huge help for my team. That keeps our licensed people in front of our customers doing licensed tasks. I have her doing almost all of our personal lines renewal quoting. A big time, suck from the rest of our group, that she handles almost all that. She's efficient. She's sharp. She's impressive. And I ended up going with Savital because of, I was able to get introduced to their back end support, and I was really impressed with their management, with their service staff. It was a very impressive organization. So I don't need a second one right now, but when I do, I'll take one.
Yeah, it's, I'm going to say something sarcastic, people, so I'm just warning you ahead of time. But when I first started getting involved with networking with other agency principals is when I was initially introduced to IAOA and got in there. And I felt like that having a VA was part of the IAOA starter pack, right? Everybody has one. Everybody, they're talking about their VA this, VA that. It was like a massive buzzword. And I really didn't think that it made... I couldn't understand what I would use a VA for in my agency, and then I finally realized, I don't even remember what happened that made it click, but you're 100% right. Specific to Savital, I can't speak for anybody else because I haven't really seen their back office operations. And I know Wes Anderson at Agency VA. I'm not going to say anything negative about Wes. He's a great guy. And I used his service until I became involved with Savital, which became a conflict of interest, but we had great experience with them. I know Andy Priestman, never used his service, but I don't have, there's just so many different companies out there right now. But, I've told the team at Savital, because one of my responsibilities with them is to really get their marketing message honed in. And I said, everybody else out there right now is sitting here pitching cheap labor, essentially, right? You can get a virtual professional and it's going to take time, put time back in your calendar. Your labor costs are going to drop and you're not going to suffer. You're actually going to, get everything done in your agency. And I said, that's not what makes us different. What makes us different is the fact that all of these people have bachelor's degrees. Many of them have master's degrees. They're extremely intelligent. They have really good skill sets. We need to feature our people, man. The one thing you don't see from any VA company out there is the fact they're featuring their people and showing that their people are what makes them different, and they're not humanizing their brand. And I know that you recorded with Troy to talk a little bit about some of your experience, but that's really the whole point in all of that is I wanted it to be, I want people to come to Savital because they're like, wow, I saw that video and it's amazing that you have people like that are virtual professionals. I know, not that anybody else has bad virtual assistants, professionals, whatever we're going to call them. It's just they're different, man. They're different than anybody else I've talked to, and I can't say enough good things about them. And my goodness, my dude that dials for appointments for us is absolutely just lighting it on fire.
Yeah, that's what he said. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely on fire. I can't tell you how much good. So the biggest issue for us, and I think this is probably the same thing that happens at a lot of agencies, the biggest issue for us was we just, it's the way we've always done it. We have ways we do things, but nothing's formalized. Nothing was documented. And so that's one of the reasons why Peggy's here is so that she can actually, having run a successful agency and knowing all of this stuff, it's honestly cheaper for me to hire somebody to come in than me to research, figure it out, try and implement it, figure out if that worked. And then, course correct. She knows everything that needs to be done, has it, and can deliver it. And so from that perspective, that makes all the sense in the world. But, I don't know if you guys use Tango or not, but that's one of the biggest things. Tango.us is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I owe it to Ciara Gravier to give her credit for introducing me to it. But we just made it a point that we're going to try and capture a different workflow every day of something we're doing. And we've got a knowledge base, whether that goes to the virtual professional or if it's going to go to somebody that we hire here, we've got those processes and procedures on lockdown.
Yeah. No, I've been wanting to check out tango.us. And for people, a lot of people ask about, for a virtual professional, well, how did you train? How did you get them going? I prepared more for our virtual professional than I have for any other staff that I've come on board, because I anticipated it being a challenge. Anytime you have somebody that's 100% remote, it's going to be an additional challenge. And we don't use Tango, but I started simple, right? I mean, I started with 3 tasks and I trained on this task specifically with Hawksoft, how to make a note, how to make a document. I made Loom videos, how to make a mortgage verification. But what I quickly found was that she mastered those really so quickly that I wasn't prepared for phase 2. And so
isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So which of course I learned, well, if I wasn't prepared enough on the front end, and I was prepared for the quoting, but with the quote, not prepared enough. So I would advise anybody that's going to take one on, I mean, make a list of, 7 to 10 things that you want them to do in their lifetime. Have it prepared, written out, have your written process, have your videos prepared, because you're going to get to them faster than you think. And then your process will go that your VA will be that much more valuable. You won't spend as much time answering questions, because otherwise that's what you're going to be doing, unless you have an operations person or someone else in the office is going to take care of that for you.
Yeah. So the beauty of Tango is you don't have to slow down to do the video. You don't have to explain it. So what Tango does is it's web-based, but it also has a desktop version. The desktop version, I think, is part of the upgrade. It's free for the web-based, and you can do 25 workflows a month. But if I'm doing something online, quoting or whatever, I literally go in and it's a Chrome extension. I click start workflow. I go into the website. I do everything I would do at my normal speed. Every time I click my mouse, Tango captures a screenshot and describes what I did. And when you're done, it creates a PDF of the workflow that's ready for you. You can clean it up a little bit if you need to add some more to it because it didn't get the thing exact, but it's ready to go, man. And you don't lose any time creating it. So it's really an awesome tool that has changed our ability to capture the things that we do every day that are just so routine in such a way that people can learn and replicate that. The other thing that I realized, especially after talking to virtual professionals for a while, is they rather would have the PDF than the video. It's much easier for you to flip a page and look than it is for you to, go back to where you were and start and stop and all of that. So I would encourage you, man. It doesn't cost you anything to try it for the web stuff. It's been a big game changer for us. So, well, listen, we've been going almost an hour. What have we missed? What do you want people to know that they don't already?
Man, I don't know. It's been a pleasure to be here and chop it up with you a little bit. So thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. I'm sorry Kyle wasn't here too.
Yeah, I wanted to meet him.
He's literally out on the road running like a fiend today. So that's good. I'm happy for him for that. I would much rather he be doing that. So, but things have been good. Well, listen, if people have questions, they want to talk to you, about your experience, talk to you about the podcast, what it's like moving from being an agent to an owner, all of that stuff. How do they get a hold of Brad Boldt?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a good way. You can email me. Email is bboldt, BBOLDT at Ameriguard, AMERI-guard, GUARD.com. And love to connect. Podcast is Agents to Owners on most of the podcast platforms. So check it out.
Cool deal. I encourage everybody to. I think this is something that you're going to hear more and more about in our industry is we continue to transition. We're at a tipping point right now. We've got a lot of older, more legacy people out there that are going to be exiting, and we need to be able to backfill and bring new talent in. So I encourage you to check out Agents to Owners. I also encourage you to check out what Miles Merwin's doing with Producers to Principals. You guys have a lot of synergies in what's going on, and certainly have both had plenty of experience to share with other people. So I'm just thankful you spent the time to come on and chat for a little bit today, Brad. It's certainly not an easy thing to run an agency. So to ask for an hour out of somebody's day to talk in the middle of it is a lot. So it means a lot to me that you would come on. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Everybody else, we'll catch you next time. We're going to be recording fast and furiously now that we've got our calendars blocked. We used to record like this just whenever somebody had time, and now we've started moving. This next week will be our first time that we record from 1 to 5 on Mondays only. And now we're not going to be doing any more podcast stuff the rest of the week. So that's the only way we can do it, to still be able to drop 3 episodes a week. But Mondays is a wash for us anyhow, because the first half of the day is all sales and operations meetings anyhow. So it's just easier to do it all at the same time. Everybody, we'll catch you next time. See ya.